Hi, everybody. This is Allison from the Love Sweetie podcast. I decided to make some bonus content to go over the contents of the lovesweetiepodcast.com website. There have been a lot of updates to the website, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew how to navigate the site to get the most out of Sweetie's story. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show everybody the lovesweetiepodcast.com website. Again, that's www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. All right. So here is the landing page of the Love Sweetie podcast website. It's a very, very simple page. There's only 3 buttons to use here, one for the podcast, one for Sweetie's scrapbook, and one for merchandise. Now, merchandise is not available yet, but when we go to create the merchandise and make that available to everybody, that's where it's going to be found. At the bottom of the website, after a brief description of the project, is the contact information for the Love Sweetie podcast, which is info@lovesweetiepodcast.com. Now, when we go to look at the information here, the first thing that we'll do is we'll go into the podcast link itself. And this page is going to go to a listing of the episodes directly. So if you're looking for one place where you can find all the episodes that have already aired and are scheduled to air for the Love Sweetie podcast, all you have to do is go to this one place. At the top is a banner. We've added this because now we're at episode 15 that was just released, and episode 16 is coming out next week. And instead of having to scroll down all the way through the entire page, the most recent episode that's aired is going to be displayed at the top. And there you can see the links to YouTube and then the 2 most popular podcasting platforms for the audio only version, which is the Apple Podcast link and the link to the podcast on Spotify. If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, we really ask that you like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. About 60% of the audience that listens to the episodes are not subscribed. So we'd appreciate if you're listening, if you can, please subscribe. And then for Apple Podcasts and for Spotify, if you can leave a review, that helps us out too. Especially, if you're enjoying the content, it's great for us to see that feedback from the audience that's listening. As you can see here, as we scroll down, are all the episodes and just a brief notation of what's contained in the episodes. If you're a new listener to this podcast, it's very suggested that you go and listen to episode 0, You, Me, and the Gatepost. This episode describes the project in general. It's about 15 minutes long, and there's really not too much video to see here, just text on a screen. So if you're listening audio only, you're not missing any photographs or anything like that in episode 0. But this 15 minutes really explains why this podcast exists and really why it's such a passion project for myself and for the others involved with it. We think it's very important for local history, not only to the family, but also for the state of Iowa and for the state of Pennsylvania, the local histories that are being published really here from the 1940s on. All the other episodes are in chronological order as they were released with their titles, and specifically the links here are provided for the videos on YouTube, so you have quick access to get to the YouTube version, as these are video feeds. You can get certainly to all the listings of all the episodes through the other podcast platforms if you're choosing to use those. The most recent episode is displayed at the bottom. Right now it's episode 15, I Hope We Live to Be 180 Years Old. And this is from December of 1943. And then episode 16 is going to be the last episode for the year 1943. Episode 16, Mr. Graham is Casting Aspersions at My Flannel Pajamas, is going to air on August 11th of 2024. Episode 17 is when we're going to kick off the year 1944 in the podcast. So if you're just tuning in now, that's where we are in the chronological history currently, but you can easily go back and access the videos for the previous episodes, or at least read through very brief summaries here so you can get an idea of what's going on. Also on the page about the podcast are 2 separate areas here, the hosts and the narrators. So the host page gives some information, some background on myself. I'm Allison, and Jamie Smith, my co-host. Jamie is a wonderful friend from the southwestern part of Pennsylvania, and she helps with reviewing the letters every week for the main episodes of the Love Sweetie podcast. To navigate back to the podcast information, simply click the button back to the podcast and go to the link now for the narrators, and you can find the information on the individuals who are narrating the actual letters that are the featured content of the podcast. I myself provide the voice for Sweetie herself as Sweetie's granddaughter. My father, Lewis Sidney Graham Jr., is voicing Sweetie's father, Dr. Chester Demery, and his picture is shown here. And then recently we've added a new part of, I would call it the voice cast here. This is Andrew Cassidy, and he provides the voice for Lewis Sidney Graham Sr., otherwise known as Lou, who Sweetie marries in December 1943 in Ottumwa, Iowa. Please make note that Andrew really has an appreciation for and is dedicated to studying at a very academic level manga, which is Japanese, basically like a Japanese comic or storylines. To anybody that does not know, I'm sure everybody that knows what manga is knows exactly what I'm talking about. He's very involved with this website, obscuremanga.wordpress.com. So please check out his website as well, because they have some podcast episodes there that he's been featured in. But for the Love Sweetie podcast, he is generously lending his voice to the letters that do appear from Lou, one of the characters in the podcast, Sweetie's spouse. And if you scroll back up, we can click Return to Home. And actually, there is one more section here. I'll go to it on the podcast website here, and that's the acknowledgement section. This is here to indicate those that are really supporting the podcast. Right now, we just have one quote from a very close family member that knew Sweetie in her lifetime. She really looked up to Sweetie, and she is a very big professional in the healthcare field. I'll just leave it there, and I'll respect her privacy. But when she heard the podcast was starting, she wrote the following: "Whatever capability I have in supporting and encouraging someone I care about, I learned from your mother." And this is in relation, the mother is Sweetie, my father's mother. "Everything I have accomplished in my life that was positive, I owe to her. I am forever grateful and fortunate to have had her, your dad, and you in my life." So this just is an acknowledgement about the story of Sweetie, really coming from a very close family member that has done very, very well professionally in a healthcare career. And she really, well, she says it, everything she's accomplished, she owes to Sweetie. So that's that positive messaging that's coming across. And I wanted to put that here on the site as a public testament to Sweetie's legacy. If we click Return to Home, then we can go to the Sweetie's Scrapbook section. Again, merchandise is not available right now. This link goes nowhere currently. Will at some point, but Sweetie's Scrapbook here has been very much updated, and it was always designed to have 3 sections. One section, the letters; the second section, the family tree and the timeline; and the third section, the photos. With regards to the letters, there's a lot of effort in making basically PDFs available of the scans of the original letters from Sweetie. We also have letters in the collection from Chester Demery, MD, Sweetie's father, which are used in the podcast, as well as letters from Lou and other individuals that come up. The letters from Chester, from Lou, and from others are not yet posted here, but we've got the page started with Sweetie's letters. So all you have to do to go to Sweetie's letters, and the others will be similar, is you can click this link here, and then selected letters will be appearing, and they'll open in a separate window. So for example, this is the letter from January 7th, 1941. The description here indicates what episode the letter was featured in, and if you click the link, it'll open in a separate window, and you'll be able to scroll through the PDF version that's the scan of the authentic letter, the original letter that Sweetie wrote. I think this is going to be the best way to make it manageable for individuals to be able to see the real letters themselves. Now, the transcriptions, they're the ones appearing online because they are far easier to read. Some of these letters are in Sweetie's elegant script. Some of them are typewritten. But of course, on the YouTube videos are the transcriptions. And in the transcriptions in the YouTube videos, I've left in any misspellings or things that were mistyped have remained mistyped. So if you've noticed a few of those when watching the episodes, that's intentional. It's to reflect as accurately as possible back to the original document themselves. And those documents are starting to be shown here. So as I go through and get those scans prepared, they're going to be appearing in that section. If we go back to Sweetie's scrapbook in general and we go to the family tree and timeline section, you can see information up to date with the individuals, the stories involved, the characters involved with the stories in Sweetie's letters, up to the point where the podcast currently is. So there's a couple things here. Everybody that's currently appearing with their full name listed here, they're either, all these individuals are either deceased at this time, or those individuals have authorized their full name to be released. If individuals are still living in the podcast, their first name only has been given and it's been abbreviated. So that's all the information that is known about them, just to keep the letter moving, but also respecting their privacy. All the efforts are being made to try to determine if people at the time of the airing of the episodes are still with us or have passed away. With regards to the family tree and timeline section here, again, the information here is only up to date to the point of where the podcast currently is in the storyline. Right now, the storyline of the podcast is in December of 1943, so the information shown here is only up to 1943. And the effort's also been made to keep the photos to that time period. So these photos are suspected or very close to photos from the 1940s themselves. In the first line here, we have Sweetie herself, Catherine, or Kay, as she had her nickname, Frances Demaree, and we have some updated information here about her marrying Lou Gramm. Lou Gramm now appears in this section of the website. We also have the very central figure here of Chester Demaree, MD, because he provides some of the letters as well on the top row here. And as of 1943, he is still serving as the town doctor in Lacona, Iowa. In the next row, we have Sweetie's mother, Laura. We have Sweetie's sister, Jean. And not enough can ever be said about Jean for keeping all these letters as long as she did and making sure that they were preserved for so long. She makes this entire project possible. And she was an amazing, amazing woman. Then we have Sweetie's brother, Bob, who's currently serving in the military in 1943 during World War II, as is Sweetie's other brother, Frank, who is shown here below. And then we have Sweetie's sister, the eldest of the Demaree siblings, also known, her nickname was Sister. And she is, as of December 1943, she's living in Iowa with her family, but she and her family are in attendance at Sweetie's wedding. And then here in the bottom right-hand corner, we have Florence Marie Boudreau, who marries Sweetie's brother, Bob, and is now part of the family as well. So we'll have a lot of references to Florence, and that's a picture of Florence from the 1940s. Below these, I would say, primary characters of the story, so all of this is in an effort to help everybody keep track of who everybody is when they're referenced to in the letters, is the timeline for the podcast up to where it currently is. So we have a little bit of a recap. I've tried to keep this as brief as possible. This is from 1941, the timeline, and then it goes into 1942 and 1943. And we're about to start the timeline here for 1944. All right, so I strongly encourage people to review through this information, especially, throughout various points of the podcast, to see the various updates, but also as a little refresher on who everybody is that's being referenced in the letters. Now I'm going to go back to Sweetie's scrapbook and open up the third portion here. And this section has gone through some major revisions and major changes to make it very easy to navigate so people can get to a lot of the great content that you'd like to see. This is the photos section of the website. Okay. And in the photos section, we have various albums that are available to take a look at. Right now, there are 6 albums that are going to be made available. 2 of the albums are currently locked. One is being currently updated, and the other album is going to be unlocked next week because the photos featured in that album, one of which is shown here, and I'll go into who this is in a moment, are going to be featured in episode 16 for the end of 1943. And we will be going over the details of those photos, and then this section will be unlocked. So you can see it says here, the Graham family, 1940s and earlier, which are photographs of the Graham family from the 1940s and previous to that decade. That album is coming soon, but I can say that the coming soon is next weekend. That's the weekend of August the 11th of 2024. If you're listening to this after the fact, it may be unlocked by the time you're listening to this anyway. The same with the letters. There's a couple disclaimers up here. The original copies of the letters and the photographs in the family collection, they're all the property of the Graham family. They're my own property and the property of my father. If you'd like to make reproductions of these photographs or use them, especially if you're doing something for academic use, please just send an email over to the info@lovesweetiepodcast.com email and we can review those requests. But please respect that these are original family photos and they are the property 100% of the family. Okay, so going into the albums themselves that are available, we have 4 of the 6 albums available right now. Again, the Graham family album is going to open up for the 1940s and earlier photos next weekend on August 11th, 2024. The second album that's being worked on because of major edits right now to provide even more content are the photos of the family heirlooms. And some of these heirlooms are books, so we're trying to put them together in the best way possible so people can browse these items, including some pages of some of the family books. But let's go into the 4 that are available. The first one, and probably the most important one, is the Demery family themselves from 1940s and earlier. So this is Sweetie's direct family in Iowa, and all you have to do to get to the album is click the link that indicates that's how you get to the album. So if you click here, all right, oh, there we go. We're going to get to really just a gallery grid of photos here. And there's some wonderful photos here in the Demery family album. And if I come across additional photos of the family at this time period, they'll be added to this section. I've tried to put these in chronological order from the oldest photos that we have to the newest photos. And what I mean by that is the oldest photo in the top left corner here is estimated to be from approximately 1895. Now, Sweetie's mother was Laura Catherine Schuler, and this is the Schuler family in 1895. And with all these albums, you can click on the photo and it will open it in a new window with a description of what the photo is. So this is really, really great. Here we have Laura's mother. This is Hannah Lucetta Dow. That was her maiden name. And then this is Henry Schuler here on the right. We actually see Sweetie's mother here in the right-hand side, standing in the back of the portrait. So for this family portrait, we anticipate that Laura, Sweetie's mother, is about 9 years old. And then to go through the remainder of the album, you have an option. You can either exit the page and go back and click into each of the photos individually if you just want to get to one. Or if you want to enjoy the whole album, you can just click the first one and use this arrow, and it will rotate through the photos for you with other descriptions. Here we're moving forward in time. This photo is approximately from 1910. Moving on to a photo also approximately from 1910. This is of Laura Catherine Schuler, Sweetie's mother. And then we get to the 40s photos, the 30s and 40s photos. These are photos of Sweetie's parents. Then this one is specifically positioned here because there are 2 photos back to back of the siblings. So you can see the 5 siblings together. These are the 5 siblings in 1926, and then we have the 5 siblings about 10 to 12 years later at the end of the 1930s. It's estimated this photo's taken sometime around 1938 when Sweetie is in high school, and probably when Jean is in high school as well. There's a 2-year difference between the 2 siblings here on the right, Sweetie on the end and Jean to her left. Well, to her right, when we're looking at it, to our left. And then there's a picture that's anticipated to be Sweetie in high school, as well as this one, and then the beautiful photo of the 40s of Florence herself, Florence Marie Boudreau, who we already talked about. So you can go ahead and page through those. There are 3 more photos following Florence. This is an extremely rare photo of Bob in uniform, which is Sweetie's elder brother. Here's Sweetie on the right. Bob is on the left of Sweetie here. This is actually Frank's wife, Maida, who's standing to the left of Bob, and then Florence appears to the left of Maida. So this had actually confused me for a moment, but we did have clarification from the family that it's actually Maida standing next to Bob and Florence standing next to Maida. So this is a great photo to see Frank's wife, Maida, here. And then we have here a picture of Chester Demery walking in a field that may very well be one of the fields around his home in Lacona, Iowa. And then we also have a picture here. Originally, I had thought that this was a picture of Chester and the dog Jeff. This has been confirmed that this is actually a picture of Sweetie's brother Frank with the dog Jeff. So we have some great pictures there from the 40s of the family. Now we can navigate back to the albums by going to the scrapbook and just going right back into the photos. And let's take a look at the next album. The next album is Sweetie at Parsons College. All right, this is the album for Sweetie at Parsons College. We've located 5 photos that we believe are Sweetie at Parsons College. Just like with the family photos of the Demerys, you can go and click into each of the photos to see their descriptions. So we have Sweetie here on the right. Then a headshot. She has the very distinctive hairstyle that she's wearing in other photos at Parsons College. So it seems that this is the college photo. And then Sweetie with her books, with the 2 girls. And this photo is actually one we suspect of the 3 of them coming out of the Parsons College library that was part of the Carnegie Library system. You can see those distinctive columns, distinctive entryway. That was very typical of the Carnegie style. So we have them descending the steps coming out of the library. And then we have a picture here of Sweetie with who we believe to be, with about 95% certainty, Sweetie's roommate at Ottumwa after they leave Parsons College, which would be Lucille Miller. So that's Lucille Miller on the left and Sweetie on the right. All right, we can go back to the next albums by just simply going back to the scrapbook link, clicking the photos again, and we'll proceed into the album here for Sweetie's wedding. We have 6 wonderful photos from Sweetie's wedding in December of 1943, now that these episodes have aired. If you missed the wedding episode in which these photos are featured, that's episode 14 of the Love Sweetie podcast. All these photos are gone through in detail, but here you can go and review and take your time with the photos. All right. And I love these photos with the wedding cake. They're really, really lovely. And then I've included here, this was shown on the screen pretty quickly from episode 15. This is actually the announcement that Sweetie prepared for Lou's parents and sent to Lou's parents, and it wound up in the collection many, many, many years later. So this is the announcement that was sent to Lou's parents in Pennsylvania, and his parents were Samuel Graham and Sidney Bonsall. So you'll see here the envelope that was directed to 936 Springfield Road in Collingdale, Pennsylvania. That's in Delaware County, or otherwise known as Delco, around Philadelphia in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania. And you'll notice the interior envelope is addressed to Mom and Pop and Dit. Dit is in reference to Lewis's sister, Elizabeth. That was his nickname for her. All right. And then the final album that is available at this time, you can access that again by clicking Sweetie's Scrapbook, going to the photos section. And I thought this would be an interesting album to put together of some of the artifacts that have appeared on the podcast or other items that they've become part of the collection that has to do with places where Sweetie was. Now, these are items. For example, I've been wearing the pin in all the episodes that Sweetie's been at NAS Ottumwa. Really, kudos goes out to the people who are supporting the restoration of the administrative building over at U.S. Naval Air Station Ottumwa. It wasn't open for many years. It was open in the 40s. think it was open for about 7 years total. But the people are very dedicated there to preserving the history and the legacy of NAS Ottumwa. Sweetie, of course, worked at the base. She first worked with the contractors and then she would work at the base. And Sweetie's husband, Lou, was one of the Navy sailors assigned to and stationed at NAS Ottumwa. So just like the photo albums, you can go ahead and click into this part of the website and it goes through pictures of the items with some descriptions of them. I, to this day, have no idea if any other of the women's badges from Ottumwa survives. So this might be the only example available of what the women wore when they reported to work at USNAS Ottumwa. There might be a few out there. It's just not clear if that's the case. But Sweetie was very good at keeping track of her things, and this did survive. So that's the close-up of the badge, the identification badge for NAS Ottumwa. Then I was able to find this item and was happy to get it. This is one of the original mugs from NAS Ottumwa with their emblem very clearly stamped on it. So we see the map of Iowa right in the center of the emblem with the star, and the star marks the spot where Ottumwa is located in the state of Iowa. I was able to find a matchbook cover from the time period that was printed for NAS Ottumwa, so that was pretty cool. And then some of these other items are just items from places where Sweetie was, and we know she was there because she mentions these locations in her letters. These are 2 matchbook covers back from the restaurant The Pink Pig, which is a restaurant that was in Hotel Ottumwa itself. I think we can understand why the matchbook covers were pink themselves. That restaurant closed, but I believe there is now a restaurant in the original location of the Pink Pig that is still open, and it is also, it has to be necessarily, it is within the Hotel Ottumwa, which is still operating in Ottumwa today. I want to say that the name of the restaurant that this is now is called the Second Street Cafe, because I believe that's Second Street that Hotel Ottumwa is on. But we have these beautiful old matchbook covers from the Pink Pig back when the restaurant was open and operational as the Pink Pig. They say you'll like the food and friendly service. And I've had some really good food in Ottumwa, and I will say it was very friendly service and it was very good food. And then also I've been able to track down an old menu for the Pink Pig so we can get an idea of what people ate at the restaurants back then, and also an idea of the price range. So this is the exterior menu. I think this is actually really clever. They're not printing all new menus. They've created an exterior menu and then they insert, that's why there's an old paper clip at the top, which is left undisturbed to preserve this further because it's been there for so long. And inside is actually a 1947 menu, but it shows us very much what the Pink Pig was serving here. And this menu is fun to peruse because you can see both what was being eaten at the time and also for how much compared to today. And we can suspect that what Sweetie was enjoying at the Pink Pig in 1943 or 1944 is going to be very similar to what they were serving in 1947. So I'm going to go back to the Sweetie's scrapbook section here. Again, this section, the Graham family 1940s and earlier, is going to be available next week. The photos of the family heirlooms is going to be very similar to the section on the miscellaneous photos of artifacts. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. But I hope everybody enjoyed this little walkthrough of the lovesweetiepodcast.com website. Please support our efforts. The easiest way to do that, of course, is to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast if you're watching it on YouTube, and to leave reviews if you're listening on the other channels. I thank everybody for all their kind words and their appreciation for the podcast so far. Of course, to Jamie for doing the excellent job that she's doing as the co-host of the podcast. And yeah, just enjoy all of the content. All of it is really dedicated to Sweetie's life and to show that we have a great connection to our past and to local history. And it's really important to remember that. Right. Thanks, and have a good night.